Torin saw the warning lights before his mind could make sense of what they meant. Frost Ridge's computers cycled through every emergency alert they had. Each alarm lit up the frozen landscape of Halvek Prime in harsh red flashes. Research Director Torin, Lena called through the comm system. Her voice shook with barely hidden panic. The Drift Prowlers are back. Perimeter sensors show at least 12 of them moving together. Torin turned up his suit's heat settings and walked to the big windows. Through the thick glass, he watched the creatures that had turned their simple research job into a nightmare. The Drift Prowlers moved across the snow with deadly grace despite their huge size. Each one measured about 10 feet long, their thick fur blending perfectly with the ice around them. "We need to evacuate," Gareth's voice crackled through the speakers. "Corporate says 48 hours for emergency pickup if the weather holds." Torin's mind raced. 48 hours was too long. The Drift Prowlers had been getting more aggressive all week. Their hunting patterns showed mating season changes. Nobody on the Frost Ridge team knew how to handle apex predators this dangerous. The cargo ship's landing broke his thoughts. According to the manifest, their emergency help had arrived. A human security specialist with experience handling dangerous wildlife. Torin watched the ship land with curiosity. Humans often solved problems in ways that made no sense to other species. Brook stepped out of the cargo bay like she was taking a casual stroll. Her gear looked standard, nothing special for protection against apex predators. She carried a basic pack and what looked like simple watching tools. Research Director Torin, Brook held out her hand in the human greeting. "Brook Williams, Wildlife Management. Heard you folks are having some trouble with the local predators." Torin shook her hand, noting how her grip felt confident instead of nervous. "The situation has gotten worse than we can handle. 12 Drift Prowlers have taken control around our station. Their behavior shows they want to attack." Brook nodded, looking out at the frozen landscape through the windows. "Mind if I check your sensor data? Want to get a feel for how they move." "Of course." Torin turned on the display system, showing the tracking info from the past 3 days. "As you can see, they work together like pack hunters. We've recorded several times they've come close to our main buildings." Brook studied the data with impressive focus. Her face changed in ways that showed she was really thinking, not just looking. "These heat signatures, they're not hunting. They're checking things out. See how they move in big circles, never coming straight at you. That's checking territory, not stalking prey." "Checking territory," Gareth joined them, his mind working through Brook's explanation. "Our animal behavior guides say this kind of behavior comes before attack patterns." "Different species, different rules," Brook said, adjusting her pack. "Mind if I head out and get a closer look? Best way to understand an animal is to watch it where it lives." Torin's monitoring systems registered shock. "You want to approach the Drift Prowlers directly. Our safety rules strongly advise staying inside during territorial conflicts." Brook smiled, a human expression that usually meant humor instead of fear. "Standard wildlife management procedure. Can't solve problems from behind walls. These creatures are trying to tell you something. The only way to understand is to listen properly." The humans' casual attitude toward apex predator encounters challenged everything Torin understood about reasonable risk. According to galactic databases, humans came from a moderately dangerous planet, yet Brook acted like she dealt with much more hazardous environments. "I'll come with you," Torin heard himself saying. "Frost Ridge rules require management supervision for outside activities." Brook nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. 2 sets of eyes are always better than 1. Within 30 minutes, they had prepared suits and basic watching equipment. Brook's prep routine looked simple compared to standard expedition rules. She carried travel food, heat imaging equipment, and what looked like basic tracking tools. The outside environment of Halvek Prime hit Torin immediately. Wind speeds went past comfortable levels, and surface temperatures registered well below standard survival limits. Brook moved through the harsh conditions with steady determination. Her breathing stayed even despite the challenging terrain. There, Brook pointed toward a snow formation about 50 meters away. See the tracks? 4 pads, claws that pull back. Recent passage, maybe 2 hours old. Torin's visual sensors detected faint impressions in the snow that his suit's computer had called geological irregularities. Brook's pattern recognition abilities beat his technology. The spacing between tracks shows careful movement instead of hunting pursuit. Brook continued, kneeling to look at the impressions closer. They're being careful, staying away from your main buildings. Respectful, even. Respectful, the idea challenged Torin's understanding of apex predator psychology. Sure, look at the pattern. Brook traced the track sequence with her gloved hand. They could have come straight to your station. Nothing's stopping them. Instead, they're keeping distance, checking you out from safe range. That's not aggression. That's curiosity mixed with caution. They followed the trail across the drift fields for about 2 hours. Brook moved with surprising efficiency across the difficult terrain. She stopped occasionally to look at more tracks or environmental signs. Her observation skills seemed almost instinctive. She detected signs that Torin's enhanced sensors had missed completely. Movement ahead, Brook whispered, crouching behind a snow formation. About 30 meters, partly hidden behind those ice clusters, Torin activated his visual enhancement systems and saw a massive shape moving between the frozen formations. The Drift Prowler's size exceeded his previous estimates. This one measured close to 13 feet long, its thick fur providing perfect camouflage against the surrounding ice. The creature's movements suggested awareness of their presence without immediate alarm. Beautiful, Brook murmured, her voice carrying genuine appreciation. Look at those adaptations. Oversized paws for snow travel, multiple fur layers for heat control. This species has been surviving in conditions that would challenge most galactic life forms. The Drift Prowler raised its head, fixing them with an intelligent gaze that suggested assessment rather than threat evaluation. Torin's emergency systems activated automatically, preparing defensive responses. Brook remained perfectly still, maintaining steady eye contact with the apex predator. Easy there, Brook spoke in low, calm tones. We're just passing through, no threat here. The creature continued watching for several more minutes before resuming its movement across the snowfield. Its departure looked deliberate rather than frightened, a conscious decision to avoid conflict rather than retreat from superior force. Amazing, Torin said, once the Drift Prowler had moved beyond detection range. It acknowledged our presence without starting aggressive responses. Standard territory checking, Brook replied, standing to brush snow from her suit. They're checking out the new neighbors, making sure we're not a threat to their hunting grounds or family groups. Pretty reasonable approach, actually. They returned to Frost Ridge as the local star began setting behind the mountain ranges. During the journey back, Brook continued pointing out environmental indicators that provided insight into Drift Prowler behavior patterns. Her casual competence in hostile wildlife management exceeded anything Torin had encountered in previous animal research. So what's your assessment? Torin asked as they entered the station's cleaning chamber. Simple coexistence protocol, Brook replied, removing her gear. They want to understand what you're doing here, make sure you're not disrupting their seasonal patterns. Give them space, show respect for their territory, maybe establish some basic communication. Gareth and Lena joined them in the main research area, both showing obvious relief at their safe return. Were you able to determine their aggressive intent? Gareth asked. No aggressive intent detected, Brook answered, settling into one of Frost Ridge's standard chairs. Just normal territory checking. They're probably more concerned about you than you are about them. Lena's communication equipment activated with an incoming transmission. Corporate emergency response, she announced. They're requesting immediate threat evaluation and recommended action. Brook looked toward Torin with raised eyebrows, a human expression that usually indicated questioning or concern. What kind of recommended actions are they looking for? Standard apex predator management, Torin replied, though he found himself reluctant to elaborate. Elimination plans to ensure Frost Ridge security. The change in Brook's demeanor was immediate and noticeable. Her relaxed posture shifted to alert attention, and her face showed strong disagreement with the proposed course of action. Elimination. These creatures aren't threatening anyone. They're just trying to understand what's happening in their territory. Corporate policy prioritizes personnel safety over indigenous wildlife preservation. Torin explained, though the words felt uncomfortable. Apex predator elimination represents standard risk management. Brook stood and moved toward the observation windows, gazing out at the frozen landscape where the Drift Prowlers continued their territorial assessment. How long have they been living on this planet? Evolution records suggest about 12 million standard years, Gareth answered. And how long has your research station been operating here? 18 months. Brook turned back toward the group, her expression suggesting serious concern. So you want to eliminate a species that's been successfully managing this ecosystem for 12 million years because they're curious about your 18-month-old research project. The logical framework of her argument challenged Torin's understanding of corporate protocols. Human perspective on interspecies coexistence seemed to prioritize long-term environmental stability over short-term security concerns. What alternative do you propose? Torin asked. Brook smiled again, though this expression carried determination rather than humor. Establish proper coexistence protocols. Show them we're not a threat. Maybe even demonstrate that we can be beneficial neighbors. Over the following days, Brook implemented what she described as basic wildlife management. She established regular observation routes that allowed the Frost Ridge team to monitor Drift Prowler movements without disrupting their territorial patterns. She also began leaving small portions of Frost Ridge's protein rations in designated areas outside the facility perimeter. You're feeding them? Brix asked during one of the daily briefings. Building trust, Brook corrected, showing them we understand proper territorial respect. Most predator conflicts arise from misunderstanding and resource competition. Remove those factors, and you usually get peaceful coexistence. Torin found himself volunteering for the daily observation expeditions. Brook's approach to wildlife management differed dramatically from standard animal study protocols, yet her results exceeded all theoretical projections. The Drift Prowlers gradually modified their patrol patterns, maintaining respectful distance from Frost Ridge activities while continuing their seasonal behaviors. During the third week of coexistence protocols, they encountered a Drift Prowler family group, 2 adults accompanied by 3 juvenile specimens. Brook observed the interaction with obvious fascination, maintaining safe distance while documenting their social structures. The juveniles are learning territorial behavior from their parents, Brook explained, watching the family group move across the snowfield. Notice how the adults position themselves between us and their young. Classic protective formation. The adult Drift Prowlers acknowledged their presence with brief eye contact before guiding their offspring away from the observation area. The interaction felt respectful rather than threatening. Mutual recognition between intelligent species sharing common environmental space. They trust us, Torin realized, processing the implications of successful interspecies communication. Trust has to be earned, Brook replied. But yes, they've accepted that we're not a threat to their family structures or hunting territories. That evening, Torin joined Brook for the routine equipment maintenance that concluded each day's observation activities. Her competence with technical systems matched her wildlife management skills. She approached complex problems with systematic thinking that produced effective solutions. Your background includes significant apex predator experience, Torin inquired as Brook adjusted the thermal imaging equipment. Grew up in wilderness areas back on Earth, Brook answered, her attention focused on calibrating the sensors. Learned early that most dangerous animals just want to be left alone to do their own thing. Respect their space, understand their needs, and conflict becomes pretty rare. Earth's apex predators are less dangerous than drift prowlers. Brook laughed, a sound that Torin found pleasant despite its unfamiliarity. Earth's apex predators include polar bears, which can weigh twice what these drift prowlers weigh, and have been known to hunt humans for food, plus tigers, lions, crocodiles, and dozens of other species that consider people potential prey items. The revelation that humans had evolved alongside multiple apex predator species explained Brook's casual competence in dangerous wildlife management. Her species had developed natural adaptation strategies for coexisting with creatures that viewed them as potential food sources. Your homeworld must present considerable survival challenges, Torin observed. Makes us pretty good at handling situations that other species might find overwhelming, Brook replied with characteristic understatement. The communication system activated with another corporate transmission. Lena's expression suggested concerning news as she received the incoming message. Corporate has issued final instructions regarding the drift prowler situation, Lena announced. Elimination plans must be implemented within 72 hours. They're sending a hunter team equipped with advanced weaponry. Brook's reaction was immediate and definitive. No, I'm sorry. Torin wasn't certain he had understood her response correctly. I said no. These animals aren't threatening anyone, and they don't deserve to be killed because some corporate administrator is nervous about liability issues. Gareth's mind processed multiple response options before settling on direct inquiry. You intend to resist corporate directive. I intend to protect a species that's done nothing wrong except exist in their natural habitat, Brook answered, her voice carrying absolute conviction. Anyone who wants to harm these creatures will have to go through me first. The statement challenged everything Torin understood about employment hierarchies and corporate authority structures. Brook's willingness to risk professional consequences for the welfare of indigenous wildlife suggested moral principles that transcended standard risk-benefit analysis. Corporate hunter teams are equipped with significant firepower, Torin warned. Individual resistance would prove ineffective. Brook smiled with an expression that seemed almost predatory. Individual resistance, maybe, but I'm not planning to resist alone. Over the next 24 hours, Brook implemented what she described as strategic wildlife protection. She established communication protocols with the drift prowler family groups, using consistent food offerings and respectful territorial acknowledgement to guide them away from the research station perimeter. You're evacuating them? Torin asked as they observed the drift prowlers moving toward the more distant valley. Relocating them temporarily, Brook corrected. The valley has better natural shelter and multiple escape routes. When the hunter team arrives, they'll find empty territory around the research station. Corporate will demand evidence of successful elimination. Brook's expression suggested she had considered this problem extensively. Then we'll give them evidence that satisfies their requirements without actually harming any animals. The hunter team arrived the following day. 3 heavily armed specialists equipped with advanced tracking technology and high-powered elimination weaponry. Their leader, a professional mercenary named Voss, reviewed the situation with obvious impatience. Standard apex predator elimination, Voss announced during the operational briefing. Sweep the perimeter, identify targets, confirm elimination. Should be completed within 12 hours. Brook joined the meeting despite lacking official authorization. I've been tracking these creatures for several weeks, happy to provide guidance on their behavioral patterns and likely locations. Voss assessed Brook with professional interest. Local expertise could prove valuable. What's your background? Wildlife specialist, significant experience with dangerous predator species. The half-truth seemed to satisfy Voss's requirements. He incorporated Brook into the hunter team as a local guide, apparently unaware that she intended to sabotage their mission. Torin found himself volunteering to accompany the elimination expedition, ostensibly to provide Frost Ridge administrative oversight, but primarily to observe Brook's strategic protection protocols. The hunter team moved across the drift fields with military precision, their advanced sensor equipment scanning for thermal signatures and territorial markers. Brook guided them toward areas where the Drift Prowlers had previously established patrol routes, knowing the creatures had relocated to safer territory. Fresh tracks, Brook announced, indicating impressions she had planted using preserved samples from earlier observations, leading toward the ice formations. Voss and his team followed the false trail with growing frustration, as their thermal sensors failed to detect living targets. Brook continued providing guidance that led them in circles through empty territory while maintaining the appearance of professional expertise. These creatures are more elusive than initial reports suggested, Voss commented after 6 hours of fruitless tracking. Highly intelligent species, Brook agreed. They've probably detected our approach and modified their territorial patterns accordingly. By the end of the day, the hunter team had eliminated several ice formations that their sensors had identified as potential drift prowler concealment locations. Brook collected samples of fur and tissue from the station's research specimens, providing the biological evidence that corporate required for successful mission confirmation. Elimination confirmed, Voss reported through the communication system. Local apex predator population has been neutralized. Research station security has been restored. After the hunter team departed, Brook and Torin returned to the valley to reestablish contact with the Drift Prowler families. The creatures emerged from their temporary shelter with obvious caution, their territory-checking behavior resuming once they determined the threat had passed. They understand what happened, Brook observed, as the Drift Prowlers gradually returned to their traditional patrol patterns. They know we protected them. The largest of the adult Drift Prowlers approached their observation position with deliberate slowness, maintaining eye contact with Brook throughout the approach. At approximately 10 feet distance, the creature settled into a resting position and began producing low-frequency vocalizations that suggested contentment rather than threat. It's thanking you, Torin realized, watching the interspecies communication with growing amazement. Mutual respect, Brook replied, extending her hand toward the massive predator. We protected their families, and they're acknowledging the debt. The Drift Prowler allowed Brook to make physical contact, its thick fur warm beneath her gloved hand. The moment represented successful interspecies cooperation that challenged everything Torin had learned about apex predator management protocols. Your protective intervention has preserved both indigenous wildlife and research operations, Torin observed as they began the return journey to the ridge. Brook's response carried characteristic understatement. We've had lots of practice dealing with creatures that could kill us if they wanted to. Makes you pretty good at finding peaceful solutions. That evening, Torin joined Brook for what had become their routine equipment maintenance session. The daily activities had evolved into comfortable companionship that transcended professional collaboration. Her presence had transformed Frost Ridge from an isolated outpost into something that felt more like home. Corporate will expect regular security reports regarding the eliminated apex predator threat, Torin mentioned as Brook calibrated the sensor array. And we'll provide those reports, Brook replied with a smile that suggested careful planning. Empty territory, no predator activity detected, research station security maintained. All technically accurate. You intend to maintain this deception indefinitely. Brook paused in her equipment adjustments to look directly at Torin. I intend to protect a species that deserves to exist in their natural habitat. If that requires creative interpretation of corporate directives, I'm prepared to accept the consequences. Her willingness to risk personal and professional security for the welfare of the Drift Prowlers represented moral courage that impressed Torin beyond measure. Human ethical frameworks appeared to prioritize life preservation over institutional authority, a perspective that challenged his understanding of civilized behavior. You realize that discovery of this deception could result in severe consequences for both of us. Brook nodded seriously. Some things are worth the risk. These creatures have been living here for millions of years. They deserve better than elimination because some administrator is nervous about liability issues. The research station's evening routine continued around them as Bricks completed environmental system checks and Gareth updated animal research logs. Lena maintained communication protocols with corporate headquarters, providing routine status reports that indicated successful apex predator management. Over the following weeks, the coexistence protocols proved remarkably successful. The Drift Prowlers resumed their traditional territorial patterns while maintaining respectful distance from research station activities. Brook continued her daily observation expeditions, documenting their behavioral adaptations and social structures. Torin found himself accompanying these expeditions with increasing frequency. Brook's expertise in wildlife management had expanded his understanding of interspecies communication beyond anything his formal animal study training had provided. Her casual competence in dangerous situations consistently produced results that challenged conventional scientific methodology. The family groups are establishing winter denning sites, Brook reported during one of their observation sessions. Classic seasonal behavior adaptation. They'll reduce activity levels during the coldest months, conserving energy for spring territorial expansion. The information provided valuable insight into Drift Prowler ecology, while confirming that the research station's presence had not disrupted their natural life cycle patterns. Successful coexistence had been achieved without elimination protocols or facility relocation. Your protective intervention has preserved both indigenous wildlife and research operations, Torin observed, an outcome that benefits all involved parties. Brook smiled with obvious satisfaction. Best kind of problem solving. Everyone gets what they need, nobody gets hurt. As the local star set behind the mountain ranges, casting Halvek Prime's frozen landscape in purple twilight, Torin realized that his feelings toward Brook had evolved beyond professional respect. Her competence, moral courage, and genuine care for all living creatures had captured his interest in ways that transcended species differences. Brook, Torin began, uncertain how to express concepts that challenged interspecies communication protocols. She turned toward him with attentive focus, her expression indicating willingness to listen despite the communication barrier between their species. Your presence has transformed this research station, Torin continued, choosing his words carefully, not merely through successful wildlife management, but through demonstration of principles that prioritize life preservation over institutional convenience. Brook's smile carried warmth that seemed to combat the planet's frozen environment. That means a lot coming from you. Your willingness to support protection protocols despite corporate pressure showed real courage. The moment felt significant despite the harsh environmental conditions surrounding them. Two individuals from different species, working together to protect creatures that corporate authorities had condemned to elimination, had discovered mutual respect that transcended normal professional relationships. When this research assignment concludes, Torin said, I would welcome opportunities for continued collaboration. Brook's response carried implications that suggested personal interest beyond mere professional association. I'd like that too. Maybe we could find other situations where wildlife management expertise might prove useful. As they returned to the ridge, the Drift Prowlers resumed their evening territorial patrols. The massive predators moved across the snowfield with graceful competence, their presence adding natural balance to the frozen ecosystem. Brook's protective intervention had preserved not merely individual creatures, but an entire species' right to exist in their ancestral territory. The research station's communication system activated with an incoming corporate transmission. Lena received the message with obvious relief as headquarters confirmed satisfaction with the apex predator elimination results. Security protocols had been implemented successfully, and research operations could continue without wildlife interference concerns. Torin and Brook exchanged glances that carried shared understanding of their successful deception. Corporate had received the evidence they required, while the Drift Prowlers continued their natural behaviors in protected territory. Both institutional requirements and wildlife preservation had been achieved through creative problem-solving that challenged conventional approaches. Sometimes the best solutions require thinking beyond standard procedures, Brook observed as they completed the day's equipment maintenance routine. Human problem-solving methodologies consistently produce results that exceed theoretical projections, Torin replied, finding himself impressed once again by her species' adaptability. Outside the research station, the Drift Prowlers moved through their territory with confident ease, their survival ensured by the intervention of two individuals who had chosen moral principle over institutional authority. The frozen landscape of Halvek Prime continued its ancient patterns, while new forms of interspecies cooperation took root in the perpetual ice and snow. The story of successful coexistence would remain undocumented in official reports, but its impact would resonate through the relationships between species, individuals, and the natural world they all shared. Brook's casual competence in dangerous wildlife management had not merely solved an immediate problem. It had demonstrated possibilities for cooperation that transcended the traditional boundaries between human ingenuity and galactic civilization. 3 months later, as the first hints of spring began to touch Halvek Prime's frozen landscape, Torin watched Brook conduct her morning equipment checks with the same methodical calm she brought to everything else. The Drift Prowlers had successfully completed their winter denning period, emerging with healthy offspring that represented the continuation of their ancient lineage. The cubs are learning territorial behaviors from their parents, Brook noted, reviewing the thermal imaging data. Classic educational progression. They'll be fully independent by next winter season. Torin observed the family groups through the station's viewing windows, marveling at how Brook's intervention had preserved not just individual lives, but generational continuity. The young Drift Prowlers played in the snow with the casual confidence of creatures who had never known fear of extermination. Corporate has approved my request for extended assignment, Torin mentioned, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the personal significance of the announcement. Brook looked up from her equipment with a smile that transformed the research station's clinical atmosphere into something warmer. That's excellent news. These animals will need continued monitoring as they adapt to changing seasonal patterns. The official justification masked deeper truths that both of them understood without explicit acknowledgement. Their professional collaboration had evolved into something that transcended standard working relationships, built through shared challenges and mutual respect for each other's unique capabilities. Your expertise has become indispensable to our research objectives, Torin said, choosing words that carried multiple layers of meaning. The feeling is mutual, Brook replied, her expression suggesting she understood the implications beyond their professional partnership. Outside, the Drift Prowlers continued their daily routines in the gradually warming landscape, unaware that their survival had depended on the intervention of two individuals from different species who had found common ground in their commitment to preserving life. Their success represented more than wildlife management. It demonstrated the possibilities that emerged when different forms of intelligence worked together toward shared goals. As another day began on Halvek Prime, Torin realized that Brook's casual competence had not only saved an apex predator species from unnecessary elimination, it had also created the foundation for relationships that would continue long after their current assignment concluded. The human approach to problem-solving had once again produced results that exceeded all conventional expectations, transforming a potential tragedy into a story of successful coexistence that would resonate across the galaxy.